Welcome to SportsBeat KC, the Kansas City Star's daily sports podcast. It's Monday, March 30th, and I'm Blair Kirchhoff. Today we're joined by Star columnists Sam Mellinger and Vahe Gregorian, who've been writing about topics other than sports these days. Sam's latest offering takes a look at employees who are being compelled by bosses to work when they don't feel comfortable as COVID-19 grips the nation and our region. Vahe writes about the pandemic and mental health issues. We talk about these topics, and then after a break, we get into sports. Plus, toward the end of our conversation, we explore Sam's new venture. Check out what Sam's doing. So here we go with Sam and Vahe. Sam and Vahe are here. How are you guys doing?
Great, man. You?
I am dynamite, Blair.
Well, that's great. I was going to ask you about your weekends. It's the first. It was the first full weekend since mandatory lockdowns and shut-ins and whatever else we're calling it. Maybe it's the second. Maybe we did this last weekend. I don't remember being out much last weekend, but it just seemed like everybody was in this weekend. And how did you guys manage the great indoors on a beautiful weekend, by the way?
Sam, why don't you go first?
Well, I had a great weekend. Actually, and it's kind of depressing though. I've started to realize how little my life has changed under this shelter-in-place order. It's pretty bad. I never realized how I was living my life until I'm just not changing all that much right now. Other than me and my wife, we got in a habit of maybe not every week, but every other week. And sometimes every week, getting a sitter and going out for dinner, just the two of us. And that obviously didn't happen right now. But, the rest of it, I can't go to the gym to work. I used to, and I mean that literally. I would go to my gym all the time, rarely work out. But they had a nice little lobby for me there to just work outside the house. But other than that, man, it's it really is sad how status quo it is. I mean, I was outside a lot with the kids, smoked some ribs yesterday, played a nice little game of catch with the kindergartner. The weather was beautiful. So, especially all things considered, the way everything's going, it was an absolutely great weekend. What about you guys?
Well,
go ahead, Vahe.
Well, I'll just say it's interesting. I was out a little bit, definitely at social distance, but also trying to sort of find this balance of going and getting things done that you want to get done. And I don't want to brag or anything, but I did send a friend something I've been meaning to send him since 2008 on Saturday. I went to the main post office at Union Station, where they had everything stripped off in 6-foot increments, and everybody respected that. And even the exchange with the postal worker, every time you stepped forward to the counter, she had mask and gloves on. She stepped back a couple feet. It was a little eerie, but kind of, I think, cheerfully eerie, and was very appreciative that they're able to do their jobs. And so things like that, took a bunch of walks, and threw a football around with Cindy. She's learning to spin it like Patrick Mahomes. That was pretty good. And we share a driveway with neighbors, and their young kids are keeping distant, but their voices are present, and that's pretty cheerful for us, really, to have that. And we also did a virtual cocktail party one night. That was pretty good. So a little bit of that. I did notice, though, Sam, I'm sure you're cognizant of this, but I do think these are the first couple of weekends any of us have been home in March for many years.
Absolutely.
And that's kind of the big thing. The big twist of all this is, we'd be getting back from Houston right about now probably, and either planning to go to the Final Four or not at this stage.
That is when Sam was saying that his things haven't changed much for him. I think you mean on certain days, because clearly this would have been we would have, as you said, Vahe, we'd have been in all likelihood coming off a regional final, working our way back from Houston. As we know now, that's where top-seeded Kansas would have placed itself in that region, and we'd be, I don't know, maybe preparing for the Final Four. I did a lot of walking myself this weekend, and I'm learning now sidewalk etiquette. Who should move into the grass and who should stay on the sidewalk. I go ahead and slide into the grass early, maybe with, 50 feet on approach. And so there's just sort of take the guesswork out of it. I'll get in the grass but say hi to everybody. And I think that's still important when you pass someone on the street or on the sidewalk. Say hello, say good morning, and be as cheerful as you can be. One thing else I've noticed, and I've seen a lot of families like the Mellingers, just mom, dad, and kids out and about on small bikes and wagons, and families walking together, and it's really neat to see. And it's probably opportunities they don't always have in a normal situation. So I really have enjoyed seeing a lot of that.
Same here.
Yeah. Yep.
All right, so both you guys.
It is wild. Well, it is wild, like you mentioned. I'm very much my personal life is not much different. That's the depressing part. But you're right. Like professionally, this is a month that we'd be gone 15 nights, 20. I don't know, a lot. And I do love my family. It's nice to be here, but I do miss covering the basketball tournament too.
Worked on the lawn on Saturday, and that's usually reserved for the first weekend after the Final Four. For me, that's the first mow and the spending time out there. But no, it came in late March this year. Hey, so both you guys, you dominated the print editions of the Kansas City Star sports section today with columns that were wonderfully written and included very little about sports. We touched on it a little bit last week, Sam, but just take us through what you tried to get across in your column today.
Yeah, so for us, I'm guessing 80% of the people listening to this, our work lives have changed pretty drastically, right? And there's obviously no games to cover, and there's some sports to still write about, but find myself interested and wanting to write about how actual real people are getting their way through this. And some of that's been positive, some of it's been talking to some people about some rough times, and kind of through that, some of it is from direct solicitation, some of it is from people just reaching out. I've heard from way too many people, and about my boss is demanding that we all come in, and if we need to stay home with symptoms or just from protection of our own safety, we have to use sick leave or vacation. And there's not very many people that have enough sick leave plus vacation to last through the end of April, right? Which is just the absolute earliest that the shelter in place is going to go. So I got really interested in this idea of, bosses and managers, and I'm not trying to, vilify them. I understand they've got pressures that are real and that I empathize with, but they are putting too many of them. It's the minority of overall businesses, but it's far too many, putting their employees in a position where they're choosing between, okay, do I go into this office for a job? And I'm not talking about doctors, nurses, police, people like that I think we'd all agree need to keep on working. I'm talking about people, and I'm trying to protect them as best I can because they are fearful for their jobs. So I'm not going to name the fields that they're in or certainly the businesses they work for, but these are not places where any reasonable person would think that they are essential. These are absolutely on the far end of the spectrum. And some of them are in businesses that damn should know better. And their employees are being put in a position where, do I go into the office where I don't feel safe, where I'm, directly interacting with the public for a job that I don't think is essential right now, close to other coworkers who I don't know where they're going or how closely they're adhering to social distancing. Do I do that, or do I try to stay home, use sick leave as long as I can, and then risk not having a job? And who wants to be without a job right now in this environment? And it's a terrible predicament that employers are putting their employees into. And I think it needs to be called out. And I wish that some of these people would speak on the record. I absolutely understand their position and why they don't want to. But, it's one thing if you hear one story about it, two stories about it, three stories about it. But when that starts to multiply over and over, and you hear just really eerily similar stories from so many, I felt like it was something I really wanted to write.
I guess I'm not surprised, but saddened to hear about that. That's just tough. And I hope the column provides some illumination to employers that are in that situation.
Yeah,
so,
me too. I hope so.
Hey, and Vahe, same with you. It was just a departure from the sports norm, and there's been a lot of that here in the last 3 weeks or so. Tell us about what you wrote.
Yeah, well, along the lines of what Sam said at the end there, it at some point, some of these things just speak to you in a certain way that you feel compelled to try to write about. And I wrote, for lack of a better term, about sort of the implications, the mental health implications that are a necessity. The mental health implications are a necessity, but obviously the social distancing is a necessity. But the implications, the unintended consequences, include isolation and loneliness, and perhaps triggers for a lot of sorts of potential mental health crisis ahead. And what's interesting, we've all experienced this part in some way or another. I got thinking about sort of the basics of writing this a couple of weeks ago, when we were just kind of facing that initial feeling of like, okay, I'm still shaking hands, but I don't know if I really should, but it's kind of weird to not shake hands. And then a day later, it's like, okay, we're all putting the elbows up. And, and teaching Sam what live long and prosper means and stuff like that. And then the more I thought about that, the more I felt like this really throws me off. I mean, this is our very first level of engagement with each other. And then as the days went by and I had other things I was working on, you could sort of start feeling the broader point about that. And so I wanted to make sure and talk to some mental health experts and try to understand if they feel the same kind of fear I do about, all the people that are vulnerable, all the people that are lonely, all the different kinds of things that could be throwing so many people off. And I did feel like it was important to try to write about it, and important to write about and be able to include some things that I thought might be not remedies, but at least worthwhile things to consider as we all face this, because everybody is facing this. It's not just those prone to some of these issues of anxiety and stress and depression before. I mean, it's everybody. And I actually, one of the reasons I want to get to my printer today is to print out this thing that Advent Health Shawnee Mission put together with 10, I thought, really helpful points that we can all kind of practice to appreciate and reach out to others.
Yeah.
Vahe, when I read that, I thought about all of us are married, and so when we don't have empty homes or apartments, I thought about young professional people who aren't home and living by themselves, and how difficult it might be for them to cope. And look, everybody has their challenges during this time. I was just thinking about people without maybe a support group at home or just a loved one at home to help get them through a tough time.
Absolutely, Blair. I mean, that's something foremost on our minds, I think. And this is kind of maybe a goofy side point, but for whatever reason, I've been inspired to sort of do a theme song of the day during the shut-in, and trying to find things that might have a little sense of humor to them, or just have a title that's kind of apt. But I was thinking about putting up Eleanor Rigby, the Beatles song, in the last day or two, and with a few words of my own to make the point that it's not that song is a piercing, almost shattering song about loneliness and isolation, and wanting to use that as a reminder to people to reach out. But I actually felt like it was just too sad and depressing to be that blunt with it. So I shelved it for the time being. But I know you guys are thinking about the very same things that way that I am. And I think a lot of people think that way. And I think that's one of the things that gives us hope, that there are people very conscious of the suffering of others right now and looking to do extraordinary things to help. I know we've come across some of those people.
Yeah, one of my favorite things about reading that, is that I think you guys might agree with this. I think that in the last 5 or 10 years, it seems like the awareness and, just from a personal standpoint, my own education and understanding of mental health and the struggles that people have with depression and a lot of other issues has grown exponentially. I think 10, 15, 20 years ago, we were still in the, just get over it, rub some dirt on it kind of thing. Yeah. And I think just in the last 5 or 10 years, I really think that started to turn, and it's too late. I mean, it's, it should have happened a long time ago, but I've been encouraged that it seems to keep gathering momentum. And I think one of the ways that it's going to keep doing that and get to where it should be is with pieces like that, with what you did, Vahe. So it was just really cool to see on a lot of different levels.
Yeah, thanks, Sam.
At the same time, I keep reading there's less and less funding for mental health issues, which is a shame. Mm-hmm. So, okay, let's take a quick break here, guys, and when we come back, we'll talk a little sports and how sports is in the news with the coronavirus. Be right back. Hey, it's Blair. Hey, we have a special subscription offer for SportsBeat KC listeners: unlimited digital access to the Kansas City Star's award-winning sports coverage. Sign up now for 1 year of Sports Pass for access to all the sports news, features, and columns we have to offer. And it's only $30. That's a 40% savings off our regular rate. For your convenience, your subscription will automatically renew after the initial term at $50 unless you tell us to cancel. A lot of subscription services won't tell you that. They'll just sneak it on there. We just told you. Your subscription helps support the sports coverage of kansascity.com and the Kansas City Star. Please visit kansascity.com/SportsBeatKC offer to get this special offer. And as always, thanks for listening. Back with Sam Mellinger and Vahe Gregorian. We're just talking sports. We weren't talking sports before, but we're going to talk some sports now. Just over the weekend and today, Monday, there have been some news items I thought are of interest. So sports items. Augusta National is going to donate $2 million toward testing and relief. Of course, there's not going to be a Masters played, at least when it's scheduled to be played. Lionel Messi, the great footballer, said he would agree to take 70% less of his pay, which is over $100 million a year, to donate to the cause. Something that Vahe and I were looking at just a little while ago. CenturyLink Field in Seattle is being turned into a hospital by the Army Corps of Engineers, and for non-COVID-19 patients, they're moving. They're using the hospitals exclusively for COVID-19 patients in Seattle. Of course, one of the epicenters, and using the space at CenturyLink Field for regular hospital stays. So all that is how sports is adjusting to this new reality. And I don't know about you guys, but I feel good when I read stories like that.
Well, heck yeah, I do too. And I know we've talked about this in some form or another. And sports, we want to be careful not to be Pollyannas about sports. Obviously, there's a lot of things that could be better about the way they play out, and sometimes they're a mirror of what we don't want to see in society. But a lot of times it can be an influence or even a sort of tip of the spear for things that are pretty desirable. And I think we all feel like sports kind of led the charge on recognition of what needed to be done, shutting things down, and we've certainly seen very upbeat and inspiring gestures by people in prominent positions through sports, and that's sort of my takeaway from it: an ongoing feeling of the potential upside of what people in these positions can do.
Another note tonight, Monday night. I didn't get the time. I don't know if it's 8 or 7 o'clock. ESPN is going to show some of the best of recent years of Monday Night Football. And to kick it off, they're going to televise or rerun the Chiefs-Rams game at the LA Coliseum 2 years ago in 2018. I was not at that game. I was covering the basketball tournament at Sprint Center. That was the game that was played in LA instead of Mexico City, and the game was moved from Mexico City because of the turf issues. That was one of the wilder games I believe I have ever seen. They show. I was sitting next to Dave Scretta from the AP, and we had it on one of our laptops. I can't remember, and we were not paying much attention to a team that would end up playing for the national championship that year, Texas Tech, and we were mesmerized by Rams Chiefs. What do you guys remember about that game?
Sammy, you want to start?
Yeah,
you have better memory than I do. You'll get more of the details.
No, I mean, it was just the wildest damn game, really, that I think I've ever seen in my life. I mean, I remember, going to the stadium that I'd never been to that stadium before. I remember that it was kind of in the middle of the fires that they were having there, and trying to fill a stadium on short notice, even for an NFL game, is difficult. The Rams gave away a bunch of tickets to first responders. I remember. I remember the Rams, I think, right tackle jumping what I thought was just a false start by a second and a half.
That was the first thing I thought of.
Yeah, it just went uncalled, and the Rams scored a touchdown. I remember Steve Nelson getting beat by I forgot the receiver. Really good. Was it Brandon Cooks? Got beat on a play, but then recovered in time to knock the ball away at the end, and people were still screaming at Steven Nelson because it was just muscle memory to yell at every Chiefs cornerback that year. I remember, was it Sorensen that got isolated on the Rams' last drive? I remember, Patrick Mahomes threw, I think it was 474 yards and 6 touchdowns that day, I think.
That's all.
I'm not trying to pull a Bill Self, you might want to check me on this. I do think that's right. But he also threw 4 interceptions. And I thought, like, really the first sort of, that was a bad decision executed poorly on one of it was later. I think it might have been the one that Marcus Peters picked off, or maybe the one right before that. Anyway, it's just kind of a bad decision to throw a ball that he shouldn't have. And he knew it right away and talked about it immediately in the postgame. But gosh, I remember that locker room seeming to be like the size for like a high school basketball team, and trying to navigate your way through that. I remember so much about that game. It was one of those games where you knew that you just saw something pretty amazing. And I can't remember what I wrote, but I was very tempted to write like, holy cow, I know the Chiefs lost, but this was a game for the ages. And then the next day, or maybe a couple days later, Bill Barnwell, who I think is terrific at what he does, writes for ESPN, came out with a piece arguing for that as the greatest regular season game in NFL history. And I think there's a point to be made for that.
Wow.
Well, it's funny, Sam, the term you used was ever saw. And what I remember thinking, one of the things right away was the oddity of a really funky press box that was being reworked, and we had a lot of obstructed view. Yeah, I mean, we were kind of. I remember, I think, actually getting up to move around to kind of take a better look, and it had the extra oddity of having all the Chiefs front office people sitting in front of us. So they were kind of on their P's and Q's because everything they would do, we would watch. So that was a little weird. And for some reason, Andy Reid, John at Jared Goff, stands out to me. That was kind of goofy. And remember Marcus Peters, and I really believe this is true. Patrick said that in that little tussle at the goal line, when people were piling on, that Marcus Peters was trying to protect him from getting jumped on. Now, maybe Patrick was just being politically correct, but I think a lot of people thought Marcus was doing more damage under there. Just all these little snapshots are what kind of come back. It was a really crazy experience. And I think you guys already said this, but I guess, is this correct? It was the first NFL game and only NFL game where both teams scored over 50?
It is. Yeah. The Chiefs scored the most. It was 54-51, if I'm not mistaken. It's the only time in NFL history a team scored 50 points and lost the game. So I didn't realize, Sam, that was your first game at the LA Coliseum. It was a stadium built in 1932 for athletes who were the size of 1932 athletes, right. And so the locker rooms didn't need to be that large. But it's hard to believe that was also, for years the home stadium for the LA Rams, and then later the LA Raiders, and so. But there's no way you can, an NFL team should be playing home games there, as the Rams have done for the last few years. But it was an incredible game, and back and forth. Tyreek Hill, I think, had his career best in yards receiving. It was over 215, I think, in that game. And you're right, the yards for Mahomes stands as his career best, and the 6 touchdowns matches, I think, his career best. He had 6 against the Steelers earlier that year. So it was quite a game, and I felt bad for you guys having to come up with columns on deadline that night, and not an easy thing. So that's on tonight on ESPN. And before we get out of here, I wanted to ask Sam about joining the podcast space. He is in that space as of last Friday, and hopefully every Friday. I hope every Friday. And I count me as your loyal listener number 1 on Mellinger Minutes for your ears. Tell us what that's going to be about, Sam.
Yeah, well, I'm just trying to continue the Star's long tradition of proud and terrific podcasts.
Yeah, Dave Helling has a terrific one.
Yes,
background.
On background is terrific. But no, I mean it's an attempt to provide something new for our beloved subscribers, and roughly around the format of the Mellinger Minutes that I'm working on right now, that will hopefully be up tomorrow morning on the website. It's gonna hopefully have a point to make in the beginning, then a conversation with readers who can call. I can plug this number right now, right? 816-234-4365. Just leave your name and where you're calling from, and leave a question, and we might include it. And then the goal is to also then include some sort of, I guess, exclusive audio, whether that's a conversation with someone that I think is interesting, that people would like to hear from in sports. It could be, on the other side of what we're in right now. Maybe it's some audio that I pick up at the ballpark or a stadium or whatever. But something else, sort of a bonus segment. Last week we had Mike Matheny on, and we talked about what should have been opening day. And I asked him how he was passing his time, and he said he's like finishing his basement. I didn't know he was, a manager / carpenter. And this week I don't want to jinx it by saying, but it's somebody else who is, very, I think, very interesting and also timely to have talking this week as well. So hopefully we'll be able to do that most weeks.
Very good. That number again, is this right? 816-234-4365.
You got it. Yep.
Yeah. So leave your question, and it'll be Mellinger Minutes for the ears. I like the title. I like the original title of the column, "Don't Kill the Mellinger," but that we just can't have that anymore.
Yeah, I can't remember what happened with that. It's taken on a few different.
Twitter Tuesday. Remember
Yeah,
when
it was Twitter Tuesday. Way back in the day, it was Ball Star. I don't know. I just got commitment issues, I guess.
I got you. All right, Sam, Vahe, great catching up with you, and we will do this again soon.
Thanks, Blair.
Right, thanks, Blair.
Thanks for spending time with us today, and a shout out to our producers, Derek Donovan, Savannah Smith, Randy Mason, Beth Welsh, Jeff Rosen, and Chris Fickett. Hey, these are unique times which call for some adjustments in our games. The columns written by Vahe and Sam can be found in the show notes. I think you'll enjoy them. And they're free. There's no paywall for the Stars' COVID-19 coverage. Stay informed during this health crisis through kansascity.com. And as a reminder, if you want to leave Sam a question for Mellinger Minutes for the Ears, that number again is 816-234-4365. I think I'll leave him a question. Well, that'll do it for today. We'll be back on Tuesday with another episode of SportsBeat KC, where we talk sports in Kansas City every day.